What if Luffy became a Marine? In an alternate universe, let's suppose that instead of Luffy wanting to become the freest man in the world, Luffy followed in the footsteps of his grandfather Garp. How would this change the One Piece narrative, and what would happen to Luffy in the story of the One Piece world? Not only that, but how would this affect all the characters that he had affected in the entirety of this series? What happens? Well, stick around and find out. My name is Ether, and today we're going to be tackling an almost impossible video to make because there's so many ways that this video could potentially go in. But for today's video, I'm kind of just going to be eyeballing it and letting you all know what I believe would be the case. Also, for starters, we have to establish one thing. Luffy becomes a Marine because this time around, his grandfather and stuff like that. But in the original, he would have became a pirate because of his one sole dream of becoming the freest person in the world. That's what the story set up in the beginning, but this video is going to be asking the question of what would happen if Luffy didn't have that encounter with Shanks. What would happen if he never made the promise and instead decided to become a Marine? Oh, also, Ace actually ends up eating the Gomu Gomu no Mi just like he would have in the original if Luffy had not been there to eat the fruit instead. Because I believe that Shanks was on that island simply to find the son of Roger and give him the legendary devil fruit that is the Hito Hito no Mi Model Nika. Sorry if I just spoiled you, but come on now. It's not like you haven't seen all the videos and thumbnails that have been going around circulating throughout the One Piece, YouTube community. That said, growing up changes a lot because now Ace has a devil fruit and he's a rubber boy. So the dynamic between the three would actually end up changing a lot between Luffy, Sabo, and Ace. What ends up essentially happening is after Sabo's death would end up occurring, Luffy and Ace would end up training, but it's actually flipped. Much like it would have been in the original where Luffy was pretty much the one trying to get a hang of the Gomu Gomu no Mi, it is now Ace who is the one trying to get a handle over the Hito Hito no Mi. And so they both end up training, knowing that one day they'll end up meeting each other in the seas, and Luffy would make a promise to Ace, telling him that he'll never harm a hair on Ace unless he does something to get on his bad side. And Ace just looks back at Luffy, smiles, and says, well then you better get stronger, as he then hits Luffy across the head, and they both would smile, knowing that one day they would meet each other on the seas. They train together and Luffy doesn't end up getting the Gomu Gomu no Mi like in the original, like I said before, instead focusing on hand-to-hand combat, with Garp visiting more often and actually taking a bigger interest in Luffy teaching him how to become a Marine and taking him off the island 2 years earlier than Luffy would have embarked on his pirate journey, leading to him training and learning hockey way sooner than he would have in the original alongside his godfather Garp. And by godfather, I messed up that pronunciation because I meant to say grandfather, but that's besides the point. He would end up slowly learning about how corrupt the Marines are over the course of the next 2 years, which would just kind of have Luffy training with his grandfather and becoming very, very powerful. At this point, he ends up essentially arriving to Shell Island under Axe-Hand Morgan's reign and finding out about what he does to the town, as he ends up beating Axe-Hand Morgan to a pulp and taking his position, climbing through the ranks awfully fast, showing that there was a corrupt officer in the Marines. Luffy would end up taking a spot and take over Shell Island. One bad thing that would come out of this is that Zoro would be dead because Luffy never saves him in time, so Zoro is kind of dunzos, and I don't think he would escape if he was tied up, so yeah, Zoro's, well, dead. Now, before you click off this video, hear me out. I can't change this without everything getting too fanficky, but trust me, the ending will be well worth it. So yeah, but that said, getting back into the story, Luffy now has officially started his road to becoming a powerful Marine, and he stays in the town for a while, actually fixing many of its problems, until eventually he ends up essentially getting sent off to another island. And also, before I forget, Kobe doesn't become a Marine because of Helmeppo, being kind of kicked off of the island alongside his father. Not only that, but Luffy never saving him from Alvida's rule. I think that, that's kind of what would realistically happen. Without Luffy, Kobe doesn't become a Marine. So Luffy ends up kind of catching wind of a certain pirate by the name of Buggy the Clown being a troublemaker across the East Blue, and so he ends up essentially going off with a pirate ship in search of Buggy the Clown. Since he's nearby, they end up going off to investigate this, and so they go off and Buggy gets essentially stomped on, absolutely shit on, by a Luffy who was more or less around the strength of Kobe when he arrived at Water 7 with Garp, except Luffy also has a very good level of haki control, so he's even stronger than even that, and Luffy is becoming the spitting image of young Garp, mastering haki faster than anyone could have imagined, becoming a force of absolute nature, and due to this, he goes around essentially defeating enemies that would cause ruckus in the world, like Arlong. By the way, this also means that Usopp's little girlfriend, yeah, she dies. And that weird villain by the name of Kuro, I think, or something like that, would end up actually winning, because had it not been for Luffy, Zoro, and Usopp, kind of, those, crooked pirates would have actually gotten away with it. And also, as for Sanji, he also ends up being just fine, just because Mihawk would end up arriving and taking care of the pirate that was pretty much causing trouble for them. That said, Sanji ends up staying there, and as for Croco Boy, he essentially wins or gets beaten by Luffy. Because, we could go one of two ways with this, where, Crocodile doesn't get messed with because he's a Marine, he's technically under the rule of the Marines, or we have Luffy end up traveling to Alabasta, which is what I'm going to be going for as for this what if particularly. That said, I'm not too sure what to do here, since like I said, the Marines really wouldn't send Luffy here. But I'm going to be stating that for some random reason or another, the Marine ship ends up landing near Alabasta, and this is where I will say that Luffy gets a glimpse of the Marines' dark side, the corrupted nature of simply allowing horrible things to happen to these poor nations. He ends up finding out about what's going on in Alabasta, and he ends up realizing that someone's essentially destroying the kingdom, so he steps in and defeats Crocodile and his men with his haki and strength to go with. Nobody around this arc even possessed half the strength that Luffy has at this point. So with this event taking place, Luffy essentially begins to have doubts about what the Marines are doing, and so he ends up confronting Garp about it. Not only that, but Nico Robin would have also been ambushed in the Alabasta arc, because Luffy, now being a Marine, has to kind of take Nico Robin out, and without knowing that she's actually not even a bad person, he ends up having to essentially take her to the Marines, where she's inevitably executed by the world government, and Nico Robin just is led to lay waste. It's one of the tragic sides of Luffy becoming a Marine. Nico Robin doesn't get saved, Zoro ends up dying, Sanji doesn't join the pirate crew, Usopp would actually end up dying as well. So a lot of the the pirates that would have ended up joining Luffy's crew would have a hell of a world to go forward now. Actually, no world to go forward in now. That said, this would lead to, Luffy kind of confronting Garp about it, who would end up revealing the truth that the world isn't as black and white as he thinks, but that they do have what they have to, do what they have to do for the good of the world. And Luffy has this moment of utter realization, where he now truly has a concrete goal to change the Marines and lead it towards a new era. Oh, and also, I forgot to mention this, but Chopper, he doesn't join the crew either, and his whole island is under Wappo's rule still, because remember guys, Luffy can't be everywhere and go on the same path of the original storyline, since he's a Marine and has to follow orders. So after this, he essentially just continues training with Garps and learns about Ace's capturing by the Marines, and about a pirate by the name of Blackbeard who has been going across the seas wanting to become a warlord. This would absolutely shatter Luffy's will to continue being a Marine, and he would be absolutely torn on what he has to do next, actually going on to ask Garp what they're going to be doing, leading to an emotional scene where Luffy asks why they don't save him, how he is a monster for not seeing him as his grandson, and how he could live with himself knowing that Ace might die. This would lead to Garp telling him that even if he wanted to go against his duties, saying that he can't, because all they have to bank on is that the Whitebeard pirates can actually save Ace, leading to Luffy kind of understanding that that's pretty much their only hope of saving Ace. And Luffy would end up thinking to himself that the Whitebeard pirates will definitely be able to save Ace. So he would not be too worried, but he also would have this feeling of utter dread come over him in, you know, in the presence of Marineford and everything that's about to go down. That said, this would end up going down just like it would have in canon, except Luffy is on the sides of the Marines and he's the one who has to fight against some random pirates and obviously would end up winning, just due to the fact that he is, well, the main character. But he is saddened about what's going on, and Ace is even sad that these are the circumstances that they've met on once again. But that eventually we get a spot when Ace was about to be essentially killed, and this is where I'm going to go off script and say Luffy jumps in the way and saves Ace, stating that he'd rather die than go to sleep knowing he let his brother die. From here, he ends up pretty much seeing as Sengoku jumps into action and tells him what does he think he's doing, as he grows into a gigantic Buddhist state and lunges down with his fist, with, you know, Ace pretty much expanding to the size of a balloon, essentially blocking the attack, leading to Ace and Luffy beginning to essentially run off as Ace and Luffy almost get away. But Akainu would end up getting in front of them and calling Ace a coward, as he would end up bad-mouthing Whitebeard, leading to Ace turning around wanting to rush in, but Luffy would punch Ace straight across the head, saying that if he does this, all of their sacrifices will be in vain, as Ace turns back around and grits his teeth and runs off, and Luffy stares down at Akainu as he tries to hit Luffy and kill him. But Garp, the legendary Garp, would jump in the way and say, if he ever tries to hurt his grandson again, it will be the last thing he ever does. As from here, he turns to Luffy and tells him to go now, that this punishment that he will receive for freeing Ace will most likely be the death penalty, so he's better off with Ace now, as he would smile at Luffy and Luffy and Ace would end up getting away, leading to a 2-year time skip where Luffy gets to know the pirate life and realizes that it's actually not half as bad as what the Marines visioned it to be. He tells Ace his goal of changing the Marine system someday, and Ace says that when he accomplishes his dream, there won't be a Marines to have to worry about. And Luffy states that he doesn't know about all that, but that said, they end up essentially traveling to Fishman Island, where after a 2-year time skip of training alongside Rayleigh, they end up becoming pretty damn powerful and defeating the villain of the Fishman Island arc, the Big Bad, and, you know, saving the mermaid princess whose name escapes me at the moment. But that aside, they also end up traveling to Dressrosa via Luffy's request because he wants to save the place, saying that it's under one of the evil warlords' control. And so they go in and fight against Doflamingo and his men, running into La, who joins them for now and helps take Doflamingo out alongside Luffy and Ace. Oh, and also, they meet Sabo! Yes! They meet the legend Sabo once again, and all of them end up reuniting, having this amazing emotional scene where all 3 brothers pretty much burst into tears, and they end up kind of just having this incredible reunion where they all smile and talk about how things really did end up in such a wacky way, about Luffy joining the Marines and now becoming a pirate, Sabo being part of the revolutionaries and stuff like that, and Sabo asking Luffy if he knows about Dragon, with Luffy saying that he absolutely does, that it was actually one of his missions assigned to him, that he would be the one to capture Dragon someday. Sabo would be pretty confused on that, but then say that now he doesn't have to do that, right? As Luffy would look at him and say, yeah, right. As, you know, he kind of looks down, realizing that his dream of becoming a powerful Marine is kind of just flown out the window, but he's just glad that he got to see his brothers. This would lead to a brief period in time where the story just kind of ends up being this thing where events slowly start playing out more and more the way that they would have in canon, where instead of the Straw Hats going through all of these arcs that are going to be happening in the new era, instead it would be Ace and the Whitebeard pirates under the leadership of Ace and Luffy being one of the co-commanders or something like that, right? That said, they destroy Doflamingo because they're way out of his league in terms of hockey and battle prowess. I genuinely don't see a world where Doflamingo stands even a slither of a chance against both Ace and Luffy, since they would have trained with Rayleigh for over 2 years, with both of them learning Conqueror's hockey and even advanced Conqueror's hockey. And you might even be wondering why. Well, it's simple. I'm going under the assumption that Rayleigh trained Luffy because he ate the devil fruit known as the Hito Hito no Mi, Model Nika. so he would want to train Ace, and by extension, Luffy, the grandson of the legendary Marine Garp, who would go on to learn and control Haki, and learning, like I said, advanced conquerors, with Ace also attaining Gear 4th and things of that nature. So that's why it's also relatively easy for them to deal with all these threats that are coming their way as quickly as they are. And now that I realize it, Luffy becoming a Marine kind of makes him even more overpowered now, but later, I don't know if he'll be able to keep up considering no Devil Fruit yet. And by yet, I mean at all, because let's just be honest, this isn't what if Luffy became a Marine and ate a Devil Fruit, but what if Luffy was a Marine? Kind of funny, judging by, at the end of the day, Luffy kind of became a Marine trader, which is kind of funny to think about, but I genuinely think that that's what would have happened. This parallel universe where Luffy becomes a Marine instead actually has a bunch of cool moments in it that I personally would love to see animated. That said, the whole Cake Saga Island stuff would have essentially been avoided, because Sanji is not part of the crew, so they wouldn't even have any reason to go there. And since they have no other goals to do, Ace is actually in, wanting to return to Wano. And so he does. And they end up in Wano ready to face off against Kaido and Big Mom, because they are both going on the mission to liberate Wano, leading to some events changing and some others just pretty much remaining the same. But overall, the fight between a 5th gear Ace and Luffy versus Kaido would be insane. And obviously the crew would win, but after this, it's all pretty much speculation, since I'm sure that you all are aware that we really haven't gone any further than Wano. So after this point, the story kind of becomes a little bit cloudy and hard to distinct what exactly would really happen, since we don't exactly know the flow of events after this, or what even ends up happening in terms of Cross Guild's involvement with the world, what the Marines go on to do after the land of Wano. So I'm kind of just going to be eyeballing it and saying that when, one of the admirals, Green Bull, ends up arriving to the scene and seeing Luffy, he kind of scoff at him and say that he is a damn traitor, along with his grandfather, who was still allowed to be a member of the Marines, seeing as he was a hero, so his punishment was pretty lenient. That said, he goes on to tell Luffy that, he's the scum of the Marines, and Luffy's actually the one who ends up handling Green Bull in this version of events, as Ace would flare his Haki and arrive to Wano, where he would have his reunion with Ace, who would smile and pretty much finally get to see Shanks after all those years of having, the encounter with him and, everything that would have happened. Ace doesn't have the straw hat with him, but what he does have is instead the Gomu no Mi, or the Hito Hito no Mi. That said, what ends up essentially happening following this little point and tangent would essentially just be the One Piece race, where essentially what ends up happening is they go on to defeat Blackbeard along the way, destroying the Red Line and joining all of the scenes, leading to Sanji's dream kind of being put together. But since he's over there dating that one girl that, is Big Mom's daughter, he doesn't exactly get to experience it. That said, we see an incredible clash between the two brothers, being an incredible final battle where they end up pretty much facing off against the, the final boss, which I believe to be Emu and not actually Blackbeard, because while Blackbeard is a cool villain in and of itself, I just don't really see Blackbeard as the final villain. I genuinely think that a better villain would be Emu, because it's about freedom. And yeah, Blackbeard's powerful and he's the opposite of Luffy or Ace in this instant, but now it would kind of all fall into the hands of Emu to pretty much be the final villain that finally ends up putting the nail into the coffin and letting the world know that the world is now free. That pretty much marks the ending to What If Luffy Became a Marine. So let me know, guys, what did you guys think about this what if down below in the comments, and let me know overall if you guys would be willing to hear out more One Piece what ifs by leaving a like on today's video to help it do so much better in the algorithm, and commenting hashtag more One Piece down below in the comments. That said, it has been your boy Zether. I love each and every single one of you guys, and I am out. Peace.